We know that over time, real estate appreciates in value generally. Nobody can predict the short run, 1, 2, 3 years, obviously. But if you can look back 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you know that real estate is a lot more expensive today than it was then.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Home Service Hustle. I'm your host, Jonathan Bannister, and today I have a special guest, Paul Neal. And Paul Neal is the author of Un-Lease Your Business, and he's going to be covering some stuff that every single one of you as business owners, especially in the home service space, needs to pay attention to. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me on, man. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Paul, you and I talked a little bit and kind of what you're doing. And like I said, this is something that I think all of my clients probably need to be educated on. I've had a couple people on the show that have gotten into the commercial purchasing of their businesses and their properties and bringing in tenants and leasing it back to themselves. So this is super exciting. I think this is going to be very informative. So kind of just jump in, like, how you kind of got started in the space and how you've kind of carved out the specialty that you guys work on.
Yeah. So, again, thanks for having me on. So love to talk about it. It's our passion to help entrepreneurs and business owners own the space that they run their business out of. I've been in and around the commercial or the real estate finance world since 1998. So I've been in the space for quite a while. And like a lot of your clients and listeners, I've owned multiple businesses. So I am a business owner. So I kind of live both sides of this. And, over a period of time working with more business owners and being one myself, I really kind of noticed there was two different tracks that people would take. And when I talk about business owners, I'm talking about businesses that have a local presence. I'm not talking about like an internet-based business and, everything is .com or whatever, but your traditional business and home service, builders, contractors, plumbers, architects, veterinarians, anybody that's got a reason to be local. But they basically fell into two camps. I've noticed over time. One camp was that group that would always rent or lease their space because they kind of fell into that habit. Everybody starts there, right? You got to start somewhere. But it just kind of got easy to kind of continue to renew the lease and do that. But then there was this other camp that at some point sort of broke out of that and said, I'm going to buy the space. And so essentially that camp turned one business into two. And looking at them over time, the huge benefits that I saw with the second group really started to outpace over time the first group. And so I really became fascinated with it and really wanted to focus my energy in that space to help people, because most business owners, they've never bought a commercial space. They may have bought, 2 or 3 homes to live in, maybe some investment properties. And they might be quite familiar with that process, but commercial is completely different. And there's a lot of myths and there's a lot of confusion, and most people don't know where to go. So we wanted to be that resource to help answer those questions and get people at least in a position to make an intelligent choice.
Yeah. So let's talk about all of it. So you said a lot of misconceptions. Let's first dive into, when do you feel is the right time to buy your own space, your own commercial building? Is there a right time, wrong time? Is there a certain type of business it's good for and not good for? Let's answer those first.
Yeah. So I would say the wrong time is pretty clear. The wrong time is when you're still in sort of phase one business launch, right? And the business is, maybe you've launched it, you might be 1, 2, 3 years old, and you're still trying to find your sea legs. You're figuring out how to do your processes, your systems, you're improving your cash flow. Maybe you're hiring and you're learning to get all that stuff in place and starting to build your repeat business, because most businesses that are successful are going to build a lot of repeat and referral business over time. And that just takes a little while to get there. So if you're in the infancy or in the early stages, or if your cash flow is not yet, pretty solid and consistent, then that would be a definite no. Now is not the time to be thinking about buying a space. The other time it's probably not is if your business, you don't see like a long glide path. Like you're going to be exiting in the next couple of years for whatever reason. Unless I put an asterisk, your intention is to build the business and then sell it. It's generally more advantageous to sell a business with real estate than without. And there's a litany of reasons why, and we could talk about that too.
Okay.
So those are really kind of the reasons not to. But once you've been in business, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, you've got some consistency, you've got a good track record, you've got cash flow, you've been used to paying rent of some amount. It's been budgeted into your, in your P&L every year. Then now it's an opportunity to start seriously thinking about it. I mean, if you've got 3 years left on your lease, you probably don't have to be too serious about it yet. But at some point, you're going to have a lease renewal. And when you've got that seasoning in the business and you're growing and you expect that you're going to be around for a while, then, you might be 12, 18, even 24 months out from lease renewal. And that's a good time to start really considering it, because it's not a fast process. And if you allow adequate time to do it right, it can be an amazing thing and experience for you. If you try to rush into it, that might be another time not to buy it. Your lease is, expiring in 2 months, and what am I going to do? Well, you're not going to find anything or close on anything in 2 months. So there are some strategies to mitigate that, but generally that's not the time to be, looking for this sort of thing.
And I think some things I'm just going to ask some questions off of stories that I've heard.
Sure.
Some people where they went down this road, it was a big win for them, but they grew out of the business within a couple years, so it was like a great thing that they grew out of their building. And so what happens in that situation? Like, are they able to leverage that building to go find another piece? Like it doesn't sound like it would necessarily be a bad thing, but what happens in that situation if someone goes, well, I don't know if, the reason I'm renting and leasing is because we keep growing. So we just keep going to another building until we know the size that we need.
Sure. No, what a great problem to have, right?
Yeah.
So, growth, I've always said and believe that growth solves just about every problem you have. So there's a couple ways to approach that. One of the ways is to try to forecast in advance, how much space you think you're going to need. And so like I just had a guy, we just literally closed a week or so ago on a 12,000 square foot flex warehouse. It's a steel building, and he's building out the first part. He's got a high-end remodeling business and also a small HVAC company that he started. But he doesn't need 12,000 feet. So he's taken 8,000 feet himself, and he's leasing the other 4,000 feet out to other businesses that are smaller on 3 to 5 year terms, because number one, they're going to pay just about the entire mortgage on the building. And two, it gives him room to expand into. So in 3 or 4 years, as his business grows, he can choose to not renew one of the 2 leases and take that space, or not renew both leases and take that space, which is getting ahead of ourselves. One of the reasons why you also want to own, because you could be the receiving end of that. You could be leasing a space. Life is great. You just got back from your great vacation, wherever you like to go. And the landlord knocks on the door Monday morning and says, oh, by the way, we're not going to renew your lease because we need to do something else with it. I literally get calls every month about that, and got one last week on that scenario. And sometimes you can do something about it and sometimes not. But so that's one option if you're in a position to do that. Not every business is going to be quite financially strong enough to do that. And so the other option would be grow into the building, max out the space, and then either open another location, a second location to expand into, which is a wholly separate model. I have a dentist that his whole model was that he's not thrilled about being a dentist, but he really wants to build a business. Right. So I think that's probably true for most dentists,
Right.
but,
I agree.
but I'm not a dentist. So,
Yeah.
I can't say. But what he did was he came out of school, and after a few years, bought the building that his practice was in, and got it. It was already doing pretty well after a few years. But his idea was, okay, in this major metro area where we're headquartered down at the beach, he was able to buy another building about 20 minutes away, which is really kind of a completely new market for a dentist, right? Because, who's going to drive, but, you don't want to drive too far to your dentist. So his idea, he bought that second building as another owner user space. And there's some really real advantages on the financial side to buying it as an owner user, where your business operates out of it or lives in it. But instead of him in there, cleaning the teeth or pulling teeth or whatever they do, he hired a young dentist out of college to, his first job to run that building. And so now he's got 2 locations, 2 buildings, and he's building equity in both. And oh, by the way, in a few years he did it again, and he had a third, and then now he's got five locations. So he's got this huge real estate business that all these practices are paying the freight on, right? And he's building equity. So that's one thing you can open up across town. The other thing is you could either sell the building, take any capital gain you have tax free in what's called a 1031 exchange, and use that to roll into a larger building that you expand and grow into. So maybe your first space, you got 4,000 feet, and you're in there. You've been in it for a few years. You could tell you're going to run out of space in the next year or so based on growth. So then that's a good time to be thinking, well, maybe we go buy or build an 8 or 10 or 12,000 square foot space where we're going to take 8, like my client Adam just did. We're going to lease out the other. So now we can move into that space, or we don't have to sell the first place. We can lease that out to somebody else. Now we're the landlord and we move to another space. So there's a whole lot of options there. It's not like, think about it like this. So, when you buy your first, most people don't rent the home they live in forever, right? Most of us will eventually buy a home, generally after a few years. We might rent for a couple of years until we know we're going to be in this area, and, we got stable jobs or businesses or whatever. But at some point, my wife kept asking me, okay, can we buy a house? Can we buy a house? I want my own home. And I'm like, yes, dear. Right. And so, there's a lot of motivations, but ultimately, we bought that first home, and it was a starter home, right? We didn't have a lot of money to put down and didn't have that much income, but we were able to leverage that after a few years to move up to a larger home and then to do it again. And then some people, they never sell the first home. They just keep it as an investment property, right? And they rent it to tenants, and then they go to the second house and they rent that one to tenants. And then now they're living these homes for a little while, and then they're building this small empire of investment real estate, as they go. So there's a lot of ways to kind of skin that cat, and, outgrowing your building, as long as it's going to be a few years. And that's part of the planning process. It's like, where do you see yourself? What's happening today? Where do you think you're going to be in 3 years and 5 years, legitimately? And let's sort of plan for that, as opposed to planning for next week, because that doesn't really help anybody.
Yep. No, I love that. I love the strategy that your friend Adam has taken, because that makes total sense. Like you can see where your business is today, where we plan to get to, over the next, 4-6 years. And it's like, even if we were to hit every single goal that we put into place, great. Well, this would be the max roughly size we would need, but let's go ahead and buy or build for that. And we don't need that right now, but we can rent it out to some other tenants, and we can always move into that space when the time is ready. So, no, I love that. All right. So now let's talk about, what does that process look like? What is, when someone is ready to start thinking about it, how far out in advance should they be looking and exploring these options? And then what is step one?
Yeah. It's a great question. I tell people that it's never too early to start thinking about it, right? As part of your strategic plan, because I think everyone should have a plan for your life. Ideally, what your life to look like, and then a plan for your vision. A vision and a plan for your business, where you see your business in a year, 3 years, 5 years, and then ultimately downstream. And I really think that if you're a business owner, you go into business because you're an owner, you're an eagle. You're creative, you're a free agent. You don't want people telling you what to do or where you can live, or, whatever. And so ownership is I think a natural piece of that puzzle that you should be considering from the beginning, even though you might not be ready in the beginning. Right. So once you're in that business, and it's profitable and it's consistent, you really should start thinking, when you're about 18 months away from lease renewal is a good time to be thinking, because the first step that I tell everybody is, and I discuss in the book, is the financial piece, right? If you were to go buy a home, you want to get pre-approved before you go look to see, how much home can I afford. But there's or qualify for. But there is a bigger question, which I just kind of stumbled into, and that is, how much can I afford? What am I comfortable with? So when you're about 18 months out, then it's a good time to start getting your financial house in order. And generally what you're going to need are the previous 3 years of tax returns, both personal and business. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at sort of the global cash flow of your business, which is basically, how much revenue is coming in as opposed to like expenses and debts going out, right? And that also applies to your personal life. So if you have a ton of personal debt, it could make it a little harder because you've got all these obligations. So that's another thing I tell people. And I'm not a huge debt advocate. There's some good debt and there's a lot of really bad debt out there, right? So that's one thing to look at. But by starting there, then you can sort of, and if you work with somebody, you can figure out, okay, how much cash flow is the business netting? What am I currently paying on rent? Where do I think I'm going to be business wise in 3 years and 5 years? How much space do I think I'm going to need? Do I think I want to, or do I know affiliated businesses that maybe could go in with me in terms of, as they could rent part of the space? You start asking these questions and getting into the numbers in the black and white. Another thing that you're going to need to know is from a financial piece, not just as the business, cash flowing, but from a down payment and closing cost standpoint. Obviously, most real estate requires down payment. Now, the funny thing is here's one of the biggest myths, and this is why people generally don't do it, is they've got a relationship with the local bank, their friend Larry, who's got their bank deposits, right? They've been dealing with Larry for years. He opened their accounts when they had no business, and now they're running $100,000 a month in cash flow through this account, right?
Yep.
Through receipts and payroll and all that. And the bank advertises on the billboards and on TV and the radio how much they're the friend of small business and they really want to help you succeed. And the truth of the matter is that's a great marketing campaign and it's a nice, warm and fuzzy, but they really just want your deposits. They don't really want to loan you large chunks of money. So, you see a piece of real estate, you're like, oh, I'd like to go buy this building that's $1 million, and you saunter on down to Larry, your buddy, and he says, okay, well, we're going to need $250,000 down payment, a 25,000 or 25% down payment, sometimes 30, sometimes 20, and we're going to put it on a 20-year amortization and a 5-year call note on a balloon, and your head's going to be spinning, and you're like, oh my gosh, 250,000. I don't have that much in my operating account, or maybe you do, but you really want to dump it all into a building. And you're like, there's no way I'm going to do that because maybe some unforeseen expenses come up. Maybe I need a new van or whatever. And so you walk away and never do the deal. The reality is you can buy that building for 0% down if you have a business that's cash flowing. Most of the clients we work with fall in the 5 to 10% down payment range to buy a building, which is less of a down payment than it takes to go buy a piece of investment real estate. If you want to go buy an investment property like a single family home, they're going to want 20% down. However, unless you buy that as an owner occupied home and you live in it for a year, then you're like, okay, I'm going to go rent it out. And then you move, then you can get in for less. So it's very kind of a similar concept. So you can get in for 0 to 5 to 10% down. So it's not nearly as much money as Larry, your friend, the banker, would tell you.
So why?
Well, because he's, if I'm a plumber and I've only got one tool in my tool belt, then it's going to fix whatever problem you got, right? Whether it's the right tool or not. And so they're only selling what they've got. And in banks, and there are some good banks out there. I don't mean to throw banks under the bus. Most of the good ones are the small
ones.
Ones.
That you can throw banks.
You can throw them under the bus. Well, yeah. Okay. So
I've had some bad relationships with some of the major banks out there, and I think they got a little bit of the devil going through them. So
they do. And if the major banks, small businesses they are not interested in you. It's the local community banks have more interest, but still not as much interest as they want you to think. So the banks, their first customer is the regulators, and then the board of directors, and then whatever portfolio requirements and needs they have, which can change rapidly. And if you look like you're a little older like me, where you probably experienced 2008 and the grand financial crisis. Well, banks were calling loans left and right on business people and whatnot. And it wasn't because they weren't making payments, it's because they didn't want that loan in their portfolio anymore. And so, they have these little features built into their loan covenants that basically say, we can call a default if we choose, or if your business isn't performing at the level that it needs to, even though you made your payment on time every time, we can call this loan. And so we saw lines of credit and things being canceled and called left and right, because the banks, again, you're way down there on the pecking order of their importance. Again, they want your deposits, because when you deposit money, you got 100, 200,000, 300,000 a month going through an operating account. You got a daily balance that's pretty high. They can take that and lend that out at smaller increments at higher interest rates to lots of people. So they diversify their risk and they make a ton of profit. And most of them don't even want to pay you any interest on your operating account, your checking accounts, right? So you got to like twist their arm to get anything. Anyway, so the loan, what they got, and they got committees, and it changes all the time. And I think the typical approval rate is less than 25% at a bank
on commercial
for loans. Yeah, on commercial, right?
Okay.
Commercial. So residential. This is the thing that most people don't get. So residential is really driven by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae. These are quasi-government entities that basically write the rules for everybody. They're the same rules. So whether you go to your local credit union, or you go to Bank of America, or a mortgage broker, or whatever, they're all basically playing by the same set of rules. They fund the loan, and then they turn around and sell it on the bond market. And Fannie and Freddie, basically they cobble them together and sell them as bonds and all that. So it's plain vanilla stuff, right? So yeah, the banks are fine with that. Generally, they're still a little higher price than the brokers, but anyway, that outside of that, they'll do a pretty good job. But commercial is a totally different world. There's no Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac in the commercial space. There's basically 5 ways you can buy a commercial property. One is cash, which we don't recommend. The second way is a great way if you can do it. It's seller financing. If you have a seller that's, maybe you've got somebody that's gotten old, up in years, and they want to pass it along, and maybe they don't have kids or whatever, they'd be happy to sell it to you. They don't need a lump sum, maybe just a retirement payout. You can negotiate a great deal with those people. And that's generally the best deals if you can do it. The conventional bank financing is one we just talked about, which are going to require higher down payment, shorter terms, which mean payments are higher. There's a whole private money world, private investors, venture capital, insurance companies, believe it or not, do a lot of lending on commercial real estate. Oh, yeah. Oh, a ton. Yeah, a ton. And then you have the last category, or SBA, Small Business Administration. Yep. Those are guaranteed loans. They don't actually loan the money, but they work with banking and non-banking lenders and sources of capital. And that's more like your Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac kind of thing, where they write the rules because they're going to guarantee it. And believe it or not, they've got some really great programs. And the people get confused because, like, every federally chartered bank in the world can actually write an SBA loan or a guarantee, but most of them don't do it very much, and they're awful at it. And that's where SBA has kind of gotten a bad rap. But the reality is there are some really awesome SBA, a lot of non-bank lenders that basically do this and do it really well. And so they've got a couple of programs. They've got what's called the 7A and the 504. And in those programs, a lot of times where we can get the low down payment and the long amortizations that you're more used to, like on residential, and without the confiscatory issues that you see, everywhere else. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's a long-winded answer, but
no, that was great. So what are the typical term lengths on commercial?
Yeah, if you go to a bank, you're going to get probably 20-year term with a 5-year balloon. So basically, I've seen 3, 5, and 7 based upon the market. Right now, typically it's about a 5-year term. So essentially, it's going to be amortized over 240 months, which is 20 years.
Okay.
So it's shorter it's like you going to the bank to get a home loan on a 15 or 20-year loan, right? Okay. So the payment's going to be quite a bit higher than 30-year.
Yeah.
But at the end of 5 years, you have to refinance. So the end of 5 years, you have to go through the whole process again, generally. Um, the private lenders, some of them will go out 30 years. Some of them will do a fixed rate for 30 years. Some of the SBA programs, within there, you have a fixed rate or a variable rate based upon the program and the lender and that sort of thing. But those are all amortized out for 25 years. So it makes that extra 5 years can make a really big difference in payment from a cash flow standpoint for a business. Cause you don't want to be, you don't want to be dumping a ton of money into your mortgage payment every month.
Right.
Business is a cash flow game, right? At the end of the day. So yeah. And then within that world, you can get a 25-year fixed rate. Some of the investors will do that. Some will do a 5-year fixed rate, but you never have to there's no balloon. So you never have to refinance that. You could keep it for the entire 25 years as opposed to like traditional bank where they will make you refinance that after 5 because it just won't go any further out risk wise than like SBA.
So you said the one of the better ways that you like is the owner finance route. Any tips and suggestions there for anyone that does stumble across that opportunity? What are some things they should be looking for or how they should strategize that?
Yeah, I mean, so really, there's two types of commercial real estate. There's owner user or owner occupied versus pure investment.
Okay.
Okay. So pure investment would be you buy a multifamily apartment building, right? So you have nothing but tenants. It could be you buy a strip mall, like a little retail strip with five, buildings in there. You might have a Starbucks and some other things, anchors or whatnot. Those are pure investment plays. Owner user simply says, hey, my business is going to go in at least roughly 50% of the space. Or if I build it, my business is going to go in 60% of the space. So you can do a sort of a hybrid of owner, user, and investment as long as you're in 51 actually percent of the space. So you're the majority user.
Okay.
But again, you can have 10 owner user locations if you have your businesses in 10 different buildings per se, right? So, again, it to me, tips and the thing to think about is that your business is already living somewhere. You're paying rent somewhere, right? If you have a local business, you got customers, you got patients, you got employees, you got whatever coming out. We're not talking about an e-commerce business where everybody works from home with an internet connection and all that, and it's done in China. No, we're talking about businesses that are going to be around that aren't going to be Amazoned out, right? Because you're not going to, the plumber's not coming from China, right? Or Silicon Valley to fix your plumbing. And same thing with the HVAC guy. So that's your business. You're paying somebody. So think about it this way: every rent payment you make, you're getting a service, right? You get to put your business somewhere, but you'll never see it again. It's like burning $100 bills, right? Lots of them. Whereas if you just do the same thing that you're doing now over the next 15 to 20 years, but instead of doing it renting someone else's space, you just make the payment to yourself. And there's ways to set that up where basically you have a real estate company that owns the real estate, and then you've got your business that basically leases from the company that you own. And so you can charge your business rent increases every single year like your landlords would do.
Yeah.
And but your mortgage payment, if it's done right, is going to be fixed or maybe even go down because if rates improve, you're going to refinance it. And so every payment that your business is making now, while you're just doing what you're doing already, you're just, serving your customers, helping your employees succeed, doing what you got to do, building your brand, you're adding equity, you're growing your equity, you're paying down the principal balance, the value of your building is going up. Because we know that over time, real estate appreciates in value generally. Nobody can predict a short run, 1, 2, 3 years, obviously. But if you can look back 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you know that real estate is a lot more expensive today than it was then.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty safe bet that 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's going to be worth more. And so You're living your life. You might not even have a grand vision to have all these, have tenants and to have, all these locations or whatever. You don't need that. If you start with a building, let's say you start with $1 million building and you've got, let's say it's about a $5,500 monthly payment roughly. Okay.
Right.
So a lot of people are paying a lot of that, more than that in rent and smaller space. All right. You're making the payments. You have nobody else in there. Your business is used to paying that anyway. Well, that building, by rule of 72, if interest rates, if appreciation is at 4%, it's going to double in value at about 15, 16 years. So let's just say 15 years from now, it's worth 2 million. Well, let's say you've paid the building off then, or you've come close to it. You're going to pay down a substantial amount in 15 years on a 25-year amortization. So now you've got this asset that you didn't do anything other than run your business like you normally run your business, but you're paying yourself in kind of a forced savings program. Because, Jonathan, here's the other thing I see with like locally based businesses. As business owners start making money, they start raising their lifestyle to match all their income, right? Mm-hmm. And they spend it. They don't have really good savings and investment plans because they're just, they got a nicer boat and, maybe a nicer car and a couple of motorcycles and all that. It's a great life. And I'm all for all that stuff. But the building, much like owning your own home, becomes a forced savings plan. That's why most of America's wealth is in home ownership. When you look at people that are in their 60s, the bulk of their wealth is in the value of their home. Same thing with your business at the end of the day. You're building wealth in this building that's just passively happening, growing month to month and year to year. Now you got equity, you got a couple $1 million in a building. You can do like my friend Kathy did. She's an OBGYN, and her husband, he's pretty daggone awesome. He was a Navy SEAL and he's a pretty rough guy. And he forced her to buy her building like 14, 15 years ago. Anyway, so she's approaching retirement, and over that period of time, they paid the building off. And one of these larger medical groups recently came to her and offered a buyout of her. And she said, okay, I'll sell you my practice with all my patients and my team and all that, but I want to work for another few years because I wasn't quite ready. She's not quite ready to retire. And they're like, okay, we'll do that. So she got a buyout. She gets a great salary and flexibility and works basically as long as she wants. And oh, by the way, because the business is there and the patients and the employees have been coming there for years and years and years, the new owners are not interested in moving the business anywhere. So they're going to rent the building back from her. So she's got a couple $1 million building. She's going to make 10, 12, something $1,000 a month and just a retirement rental income stream on this building.
Yeah.
For as long as she wants. And then one day they might wake up and say, honey, let's sell this thing. And they could sell it, and take the capital gain and do what they want with it. But the point here is, if you're an owner, if you're a user, a business owner, you gotta live. Your business has to live somewhere, and so those 15 years are going to pass. The 20 years are going to pass either way.
Yep.
Right. And I
I
have a 21-year-old now.
Anyway, I feel like it would be. Would it not also be another avenue if the business were to get any kind of financial trouble and they needed additional funding? Like, well, they've got another asset there for the lenders to be able to look at to provide that for.
Oh, absolutely. Lenders don't like to lend on blue sky.
Yeah.
And they look at businesses as blue sky. And so you can go out and get one of these cash flow loans, these cabbage loans and things like that. And they just take people to the cleaners. It should be illegal.
It's not regulated.
Yeah, I know. It's like check cashing services for businesses, and they get in a pinch and they go, it's ridiculous. But if you have real estate, you're a different animal. Now you have collateral. That's legit, because the bank can say, well, I can sell that if I have to. But on the positive side there, not only if you get in trouble, but so we have a client that has used the equity in the building. They've leveraged that to acquire competitors. Because again, now I've got all this equity. Think about it. I got $1 million in equity in my building after 10 years. It's latent there. A competitor comes up for purchase. I don't want to use my cash. And so every lender in America would do that deal, right? Because, we'll just use the equity in the building you've already got. It's you basically, you already own it. So now you're able to acquire competitors, increase your cash flow, and it didn't cost you a thing because you were paying rent on your building to yourself the whole time, right?
Yeah.
So that You want to go sell your business in the future? Same deal. The value's higher because with real estate, it's easier to finance the sale, and so you're going to have more qualified buyers be able to come to the table when the real estate is there, because you'll have more lenders say, yes, I'll finance that, and the terms are going to be longer because you can finance it more on the real estate terms over 25 years versus 10, which is typically when you get like a business acquisition. And that 10 years can be pretty expensive, right? If you're buying a 500,000 or a million or $2 million business and it's over a 10-year term. So yeah, so there's a lot of advantages and things you can do with that equity. You could also, here's another thing you could do, and then I'll shut up. You could refinance the building and take the equity out. And so you might take out a chunk of 3, 4, 500,000, something like that, and use it for whatever, because it's not a capital gain. So you're not going to get taxed on it. But if you sell the building outright and just go use it for, to buy your yacht or whatever, you're going to pay tax on that. But if you take 300,000 out because you want to buy maybe more investment properties, or maybe that's your college fund for your kids or whatever, or whatever you want to do with it, it's considered debt, not a capital gain. So the point is, you have all kinds of options that you wouldn't have if you didn't do it. And so at some point you got to consider, does it make sense to dip my big toe in and cross the chasm or not? And yeah.
All right. So 2 questions here. One, and this could all be in one topic here. So like, what are some of the common challenges that some of your clients face when they're trying to secure these commercial loans? And how do you guys assist them navigating these hurdles? And then what are some additional reasons why people, like every business owner, is not looking to do this?
Well, I mean, common pitfalls and things. So, I mean, there are a lot, because you don't know what you don't know. So generally, again, if you go to a local bank, they're not representing you, they're representing themselves. And they get deals every day. And if you don't provide what they want, your deal goes on the back burner, and they don't really think a lot about it, right? Not that important to them. So what we do is we help people do that deep dive up front, because again, it's in my mind is critical that you're making a big decision. And so you need to know what the decision is you're making. And there's a lot of things, again, you don't know, like, again, the financial piece, you got to uncover that. One of the things we do is we have a 53 question questionnaire we make people answer. It only takes about an hour. They're not like essay questions, but it uncovers a lot of like potential pitfalls and landmines that may show up downstream that we want to surface in the beginning, so we can address and have a conversation about it and educate on. For instance, if there's any skeletons in your closet, and everybody has some skeletons, right? And that's okay, because 99 times out of 100, we can mitigate those and resolve them if we know up front. The problem comes in like when you're self-representing or you're just diving right in. Again, you work with the bank, something shows up towards the end of the process that they didn't know about. Like maybe your personal financial statement wasn't entirely accurate, and that can be a deal killer, because they don't like surprises. Banks do not like surprises, right? And so we try to uncover that, address it, and then come up with a strategy to mitigate it. That's early. Other things like, once we understand your goals and where you're going and potential issues, credit's an issue for sure. I mean, you don't have to walk on water to buy a building, but you do have to have a history of paying your bills and, and being decent there. And if there are issues there, again, opportunities to mitigate. If, there's one-time issues, we need to figure out why and deal with it. Here's one that most people don't think about, but one of the things that lenders look at today are your reputation online. So what do your customers think about you, right? Mm. So, I mean, everybody gets a bad review from time to time, but if you've got nothing but bad reviews and people are just like trashing your business, then character is important, because the lenders all want to get paid back. And they're like, yeah, and they're checking this stuff out today. I mean, here's the thing: 20 years ago, you might have been able to hide a few things and whatnot, but not anymore. And that's critical. In fact, there's a bunch of people that are getting nailed right now and have been for the last year on fraudulent PPP claims and all that. There are a lot of people that were making up businesses and all that. They got away with it initially because there was so much mud against the wall. But SBA, to their credit, has really taken the time to go back and look more deeply into these. And there's some people, I mean, some crazy stuff people did. But so stuff you will get found out. And so we try to put the stuff on the table up front. Then we want to find out, here's another one that can be a deal killer. Like if you're married and you go through this process and you weren't completely upfront with your spouse about the deal, and then all of a sudden closing comes around and your spouse has to come to the closing table and maybe sign a personal guarantee. And you're like, and she's like, what? Or he's like, what? You didn't tell me about this. So, and some programs will require that, some won't. And so it's like, this is the things you got to have the conversations on early and say, all right, what's most important to you? So once we investigate and then deal with the issues and then sort of underwrite for, a strategy, then what we like to do, you can do it on your own too, if you have the time and energy and you can figure out the market. It's a lot, but we like to present 3 or 4 options based upon everything that we've learned about, your situation, your cash flow, how much money you want to put into the deal, your long-term goals, and the other considerations. Like, for instance, some programs will require you to pledge your house, some won't. Okay, it's important to know that before you go to closing, right? You don't want to have told your entire staff that you're moving to this new building, everybody's excited about it, and you're 2 weeks away, and then it blows up at the end because something stupid like that. And that's not good for morale and for planning and all that. So we like to get all this done way in advance. And so then once all that's squared away, you know what the options are, you know what you're walking into. Hey, Jonathan, here's 3 options. Here's the pluses and minuses of each one, the pros and cons. Okay, this is the home or building you're, comfortable or qualified for. Now you want to pair up with a great commercial real estate agent locally who knows your market, not a residential real estate agent. They're great people. They do a lot of great things, but they're different markets. And they're going to help you find the space. We're going to communicate with them what we've communicated, not your nitty gritty details, but in terms of about the size of the building and space. But they also know what's happening in your local area. Like if Amazon is going to build a big warehouse in one area and that could impact your business in some way, or there's a new strip shopping center and a brewery coming over here in the next 3 years, it was just approved by development, might be a good idea to position over there, kind of thing. They're going to know all that stuff. And so they're going to help you find the space and negotiate. And then we all work together to say, okay, this is how much you can afford. They negotiate a contract and then boom, we're off to the races. And so from a timeline, that preliminary stuff that we work on could be anywhere from, 4 weeks to 6 months based upon how rapidly we can get information from, the business owner. And our thing is we like to have the business owner focus on building their business. And so most of the time we get their permission to interface, like with their accountant, CPA, and attorney, and we get a lot of this stuff on our own. So we really minimize how much of that's legwork they need to do. But once all that's done and there's a plan and the business owner knows, okay, this is what I can afford, this is what I'm comfortable with, this is the strategy we're going to go after. And then they start looking for property. That can be 4 weeks or 4 months as well. And if they decide they want to build something, it could be 12 months. So there's a timeline there. And then once they go into contract, it's about 60 days, maybe 80 days, sometimes 90 from contract to closing. So there's more involved than hey, honey, I love this house. Let's go buy it. You're in contract tomorrow and then you're closed in 30 days and you're moved. But with all that said, the biggest tip is be prepared early, and before you go into a transaction, before you start talking to people about, like your team and your customers about doing all this, because you want to do it in a smart way. And if you do that, then it's a great process. It's stress-free. there's no surprises, and it's an amazing experience for you.
So I'm curious you've mentioned a few times about different, I don't know if it's different lending options or different ways that the lenders look at it whenever the owner of the business is going to occupy a certain percentage of that building or something. Are there pros and cons to that method? Like obviously someone that's investing in possibly multiple properties, and that's kind of what they're looking to do. That is their business. They're not looking to put their actual physical business there. What are the pros and cons of that method?
Yeah, well, so a pure up investment play, you're gonna then instead of looking at the cash flow of your business and creating opportunities there, like lower down payment and that sort of thing, it's a pure investment play. And so generally, what we look at is the cash flow of the property, and that's about it. And so in those scenarios, you're looking at generally 20 to 30 to more % down payment, because you have to make the cash flow work. And because the lenders know you're not physically in the space and it's not your business, but you're just, you're the landlord, then there's more risk to you and there's more risk to them. And so you have to put more skin in the game.
Gotcha.
So the pure investment plays, they're great deals. We have people that do that. We have a lot of people that do both. But you're gonna be writing a bigger check up front to get into that. And in the cash flow varies. So like right now we've got one right now. It's a $2 million apartment complex, and they're having to put almost 50% down to make the cash flow work.
Wow.
And that has to do with the rate environment, but it also has to do with the rents that they're getting in that particular building. So each investment property, they're all like a business of itself, right? So if I buy a 4-plex apartment building or a 10 unit, then that's a business. That's not that much different from me buying another HVAC company, right?
Right.
I don't have employees there, but I do have tenants, and I have a P&L. I've got revenue coming in from my rents, and maybe I'm charging for laundry and maybe parking places or whatever. But then I have, and I have sort of the maximum, but also have some vacancy because I got some turnover. I got to calculate that in, right? But then also have all these expenses. So I got my profit and loss, and then my net income is really what I have left over to service the debt. And so we're looking for, as an industry, about 1.25 greater net income than debt service.
Okay.
So the more expensive the debt is, either because of the interest rate or the size of the loan, then that's where you're going to have limits on how big the loan can be, which means a larger down payment, so to speak. And again, that varies, and it varies with different asset classes. Like some people, believe it or not, like a self-storage facility, that's one of the very few like investment property types that SBA will guarantee, because SBA doesn't do any investment. I mean, they're pure play for owner occupied stuff. But they will do self-storage units, which means a lower down payment for those. And you have tenants there too, but once they give you their credit card and put their junk in there, they forget about it, right? You just tap their credit card every month. It's a beautiful model. I highly recommend it for anyone who can get them. They're getting so expensive though, because people are figuring it out.
Right.
They're like, huge multi-family apartments with no toilets to clean, and no calls at Sunday night at 7:30 during the football game. So, but that's the primary difference. So pure investment play, bigger down payment. It's based on the cash flow of that particular entity. And then owner occupied says, hey, I'm going to put my business in it, or one of my businesses in it. And so because I'm doing that, there's less risk to everybody, because I'm there all the time, or my business is there all the time because it has to live somewhere. And so I can get in there with a lower down payment. I can get longer terms and generally better rates and that sort of thing.
I love it. All right, so we're getting to the end here. I close out with these rapid fire questions where I'm just gonna throw some stuff out. You're gonna shoot from
Sure.
the hip. But before that, how do people reach you? How do they get the book, Unleash Your Business? How do they need to go about if they want to talk to you and your team?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you asking. So the easy way is to go to our website, ownyourbuildingnow.com. Ownyourbuildingnow.com. Very simple.
Yeah.
They can pick up a free copy of the book, Unleash Your Business, How to Unlock Wealth, Autonomy, and Control by buying your business and firing your landlord. We print it and mail it, so we just ask for you to pay that. And in addition to that, on that same website, there is a 2-minute assessment. It's a free assessment you can take. Basically, it's 20 questions. And the whole idea behind it is to help you determine how, buyer ready are you in terms of buying commercial real estate. And it'll give you a custom report when you're done based upon your specific answers to the questions. And so it's pretty cool to kind of give someone a sense, just kind of litmus test, real quick and easy. And on that site, they can also schedule a time for me or one of my team to have like a 15, 20-minute strategy session where we basically just kind of uncover where you are. Does it make sense at all? There's like 6 keys that we look for right up front to say, yeah, if you check all these boxes, then you're legitimate a candidate. But if not, then, I'd go work on these and let's have a conversation again sometime in the future, kind of thing.
I love it. And that's on your website, or they just reach out to somebody on there?
Yeah, they can schedule on that. Ownyourbuildingnow.com. There's a button to schedule a time.
I love it. This has been super informative. And I think it's, like you said, which, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's probably the bigger reason maybe they have their buddies at the bank, their local bank, that kind of turned them away or something. But I do feel that I think a lot of people just don't know, what they're missing out on, or they think the process is too hard, or they're going to need to put down $1 million to be able to achieve it. So,
yeah, no doubt. You're absolutely right.
All right, we're going to do rapid fire questions with Paul. Are we ready?
Sure, why not?
All right, here we go. Rapid fire with Paul.
All right.
Childhood hero.
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. Oh, that's a good one. Beach or mountains?
Well, I lived at the beach for 30 years, and I'm now in the mountains.
What
it's
beach?
The mountains. Virginia Beach.
Okay. And mountains where now?
Mountains of Virginia.
Okay. All right. So you're stayed in Virginia, just went from beach to mountain.
I stayed in Virginia, but I love to ski. So when we ski, we mostly go out to Utah. So I ski in Utah and I live in the Virginia mountains.
Okay. Most adventurous thing that Paul's ever done?
Probably caving in the mountains. That was kind of crazy.
That sounds fun.
Tight spaces, man.
A little scary. Sounds fun.
Yeah. A lot of bats and dark, and it was uncharted territory.
Something surprising that most people don't know about you.
Well, most people don't know I just got an electric bike, my wife and I, and so we ride them in the mountains. And now I want to get an electric mountain bike, which is a whole nother level, because we have these mountain trails, and but I want help getting up, but gravity will help me coming down.
If you had to make a sudden career change, what would it be?
I'd be a futures trader all day long.
Okay. And the last one is, what is Paul's belief in aliens?
Well, when I look at Washington, D.C., I see a lot of them. So they've got to be real. They're definitely embodying most of the people up there.
I don't know if they're aliens. A lot of them are demons up there in Washington. So,
well, there definitely are a lot of demons. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. So as far as aliens themselves, I do believe that all of our technology has come from Area 51, though. So I think that's when we got the major advance in the world, in the early 50s that we got that spaceship, and magically we invent, right? We got the transistor and then the microprocessor, and how about that, right?
I agree. Well, Paul, this has been great having you on the show. I love nothing more than being able to deliver a ton of value to people. And I think for all business owners out there, this is going to be huge. So thank you so much for coming on. And I hope my listeners will reach out to you and get the process started.
Yeah, Jonathan, it's been great. A lot of fun, man. I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul.